Hello and welcome to Rage Quit. My name is Jay and today we're going to be talking about a controversial subject that is doing the rounds on YouTube. It's the COPPA Act or the COPPA Act. It's COPPA, and not one to miss like a chance to either clickbait or get involved in these controversies. I just wanted to state my opinions and my thoughts on it right now. And I'm not going to clickbait this title with something like Wargaming on YouTube is dead, because quite frankly I don't believe that. I do believe that this is a problem in certain YouTube communities, but I don't really personally think that wargaming will be too affected. Right? That's my opening pitch. If you like this video, at the end of this video, press like, and if you're not subscribed and you're interested in wargaming, press subscribe. That really helps. So you might be thinking, yeah, I've not heard of this. What are you talking about? I'm not going to go into too much detail. One, I'm not a lawyer. Two, I'm not in the US. Three, I've not even read the complaint. I've only seen like YouTube videos and people talking about it. So my knowledge is deliberately sketchy at best. But it's something that a lot of people are interested in. Just keep that in mind. Essentially, though, in 1998, there was a law called the COPPA Act, or COPPA, which said we don't want to keep information on children. Businesses shouldn't be allowed to track kids, their private information. When I say kids, it's 12 and under or less than 13. We need to keep their privacy safe. Now, intuitively and instinctively, to me, that sounds fine. That's good. We don't want our children in society to have the same liabilities and information tracked on them as adults would, because they don't have the same ability to agree to it. Essentially, they don't know what they're getting into. So intuitively, as an act goes, it sounds fine. Now, technology has developed, cookies have come out, etc., and it turns out that YouTube has possibly been tracking the private data of kids more than they should have been, and that caused a problem. Therefore, YouTube were fined, and then they've come to an agreement where the onus is going to be on the content creators to determine if the content is aimed at children or not. You might think, fine, that sounds fine. If the problem is, what happens when you say that your content is for children, or when you say it's not and it actually is found out to be yes? They're the two problems. So let's deal with them one at a time. If you state your content is for kids, basically you lose certain monetization. I'm not 100% sure what it is in that sense. I don't know if it's like all ads or some ads or whatever it is. You're going to lose like comments, the notification bell. Just you can't search on the videos and that kind of thing. You just lose features, which ultimately is going to harm the creators. Oh, my phone's randomly vibrating quite a lot there. You're going to lose features that currently enable certain content creators whose content is aimed at kids to make money and make a living, which is a problem, but I'm not necessarily sure how you deal with that. And the second problem is, what if you incorrectly determine your content and it's found to be in violation? So let's say I don't say my content is aimed at kids. Now, this aimed at kids is like, even that's written vague. It's something like written as something like appealing to children, which, danger is appealing to children in UK law. So that in itself is vague. But anyway, I say my content's not appealing to children. Now, I think starting in January or something like that, the FTC have the right to come along, check the videos on YouTube, and if they say, well, this video is actually appealing to children, and the content creator has said, no, it's not, that content creator can be fined, especially in the US. I think if you're not in the US, I'm not sure if they can fine you, or if they'll just get YouTube to just get rid of your channel. Do you know what I mean? So the FTC will have a certain kind of power. I think it's the FTC who are the people who are going to be responsible for that. I'm not 100% sure what FTC stands for, but it's basically a federal body in the US that will have the power to do this. And they normally deal with like TV and media and that kind of thing. So if you incorrectly allocate that your content's not for kids, but it's found to be for kids, the FTC, I think they can fine you like something like $40,000, right? Quite a large amount per video, by the way. So you obviously don't want to be incorrect. And again, that's not necessarily a problem, because, if it is aimed at kids, it's aimed at kids and you should abide by the rules. The problem is the definition of like aimed at kids or appealing to children is so vague that, and the wording of it isn't clear. Like, is a toy review? Possibly. Is wargaming? Probably not. It's really hard to define this. There's not like a set list. And to some extent, that will be deliberate. The definition of this will generally be what an ordinary person will view that content as being aimed at. So yes, we know stuff like if it's involving like Frozen characters, probably aimed at kids. If it's involving Lego, probably aimed at kids. Even though not necessarily all of them. I remember watching a gentleman on YouTube, I don't remember his channel name, he's like talking about a Stranger Things Lego set, which Stranger Things isn't aimed at kids, but obviously Lego probably is by definition kind of aimed at kids. So what is that one? Is that aimed at children or not? Is it appealing to children or not? The vagueness of it is part of the problem, right? Now, that's definitely going to affect Lego channels and video games, whether it's kids' video games, toy reviews, etc. Like, they're going to be impacted by this, because if they don't say that their stuff is aimed at kids, and it sort of obviously is to a lot of people, then they run the risk of being fined. And if they do, then they're going to lose like monetization features. Basically, if your video isn't getting comments on YouTube, YouTube's not necessarily going to promote it the same. And at the minute, it looks like they would lose money, right? Fine. Now, I say fine. That's bad, and it is a problem. But I'm not 100% sure of the fix for that one. I don't think there necessarily is an obvious answer there, right? Because we want to protect children online in all different ways of doing that, and tracking their information is obviously bad. What if they get hacked, etc.? Like, that's bad. Aiming content at children isn't necessarily bad, depending on the kind of content. Obviously, that the whole Elsa with the sexual content and stuff like that obviously was bad. But yeah, so there's a problem there. You don't want to see the content creators who are definitely in the kids, aiming content at kids, to be too adversely affected. It's not like that's intuitively a problem, or by definition a problem, but then tracking the information is a problem. So I don't have the answer for that. And then you have the ones where it's sort of like leaning towards probably kid content, but some of the content might not be, or most of it isn't, but it's in a field that is predominantly aimed at children. That again, they're going to probably be negatively impacted there. And then finally, I know it's like 7 minutes into this, we get to wargaming, right? Now, wargaming, you could argue some of it is appealing to children, especially the way Games Workshop do theirs. Like, if you go into a Games Workshop store, there's generally often mostly kids in there, right? For sure. Now, that doesn't mean the content is primarily aimed at children. And a lot of the audience on YouTube for wargaming specifically, they're like 18 plus minimum, 25 plus likely, right? But it's problematic if a layperson thinks that a wargaming figure, a plastic toy, let's be real, right, is aimed at kids. Technically, the FTC could come along and be like, you guys are all aiming your stuff at kids. Now, obviously, that's technically not true, but there's a risk there that I think exists, but I think it's relatively small. And the only problem with it is the vagueness of appealing to children, right? Because in the wargaming hobby, I mean, you've got solvents, plastic glue, even you've got knives. You've got knives just possibly lying about to take your mold lines off and that kind of stuff. You've got clippers, as I said, solvents, spray cans, all kinds of stuff. It's war. Generally, it's called wargaming. And war, generally, you would think isn't deliberately appealing to children under 12, although, little plastic green soldiers do, so what's that, I just think ultimately wargaming, it's unlikely to be in the crossfire of this, right? I don't think wargaming is necessarily a problem. I think a lot of content creators are just going to, in the wargaming sphere, set their content to not be appealing to kids. That's what I have done, because I firmly believe that wargaming is generally a 13 plus kind of content, right? If I have to start dropping F-bombs at the start of my videos, like I might do if that was the problem. But yeah, I don't think personally wargaming is, right? But then this is going to be a very weird line. As I said, I saw that guy argue essentially a Stranger Things Lego set isn't aimed at kids. But obviously, even if it isn't, or it is, the other content, some of it probably is, some of it might not be, but it's going to be very hard to argue. We don't know what powers or how I'm pretty sure it's the FTC. We don't know how they're going to deal with these kind of issues. Will they come straight out with a fine? They could just make you change that one video. Do you know what I mean? It's going to be interesting. So I just want to reiterate, I don't think this is the end of the world for wargaming. I think wargaming is going to come away from it mostly scot-free. For sure, right? I think now it is a bit of a problem for other content creators who do who do stuff mostly aimed at kids. I can imagine certain crossovers. So let's say like maybe the wrestling game from HeroClix, maybe HeroClix as a whole, where it's pre-painted superheroes. Like there are certain war games that have themes aimed at children, and those games you don't necessarily need to paint the miniatures. You can just buy them and play with them. And really, it sort of is hard to argue that that's not primarily like appealing to children. So I reckon there is actually going to be a bit of a crossover. So I don't mean to be alarmist. I almost certainly don't mean to do that. And all I can actually suggest if you're a viewer of this is just keep watching your favourite content providers. Try and seek them out, even if they mark their stuff as appealing to children. Supporting people on Patreon. Like I have a Patreon for my terrain channel. If you want to check that out, I would honestly appreciate that. But like, really, it's only going to affect YouTube ad revenue, but it might affect YouTube discoverability and etc. So it's fine to support people on Patreon, but really we're going to have to see where the dust settles on this one, I think. And I just wanted to talk about it because, a lot of people will be alarmist about it, and some people will be more reasonable about it. And I think I sit squarely sort of in the middle. I'm not sure how relevant this will be to YouTube as a whole. But for sure, I think this is something you need to be concerned about if you're a content creator. You need to be aware of it and give it some thought. I think I can legitimately, and Wargaming can legitimately argue that content is primarily aimed at adults and mostly appealing to adults. But just because your audience is primarily adults doesn't mean that somebody might come along and say, you've got toy soldiers there, that's appealing to children. So I do think it's worth keeping a level head about it and trying to be as balanced as possible in this regard. So yeah, it's not a massive problem, especially if you're a viewer of the content. You might not even notice any difference, apart from you'll see people like me moaning about it and complaining about it, etc. As I said, I'm not a lawyer. I've not read the fine. I've not read the original act. I've only seen people's YouTube videos and people's comments on Reddit and stuff like that. So don't take my word as gospel. I'm often wrong and very much could be wrong in this situation. But they're my thoughts on the COPPA Act and how it is possibly an issue, but maybe not for me. But that doesn't mean it's not an issue. Just because I'm not affected doesn't mean we shouldn't be concerned. Just because we as a community aren't affected doesn't mean we should ignore it. I mean, do you know what I mean? If we believe in something, we should fight for it, whether it's for us or for people who are adversely affected that aren't us. At least that's what I believe. Hopefully you believe that too. Have a most beautiful day though, and goodbye.